viewers, welcome to Sansad TV podcast. I am Teena. Despite the global uncertainties, India will grow at more than 7%. We are confident that we will do even better. This was the assertion made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the recently held Kautilya Economic Conclave. In his address, the Prime Minister underlined that the Indian economy is going through big transformational changes. With strong economic fundamentals, the economy is on course towards sustained high growth. India is not just preparing to reach the top, but is also working hard to remain on top. Highlighting his government's mantra of reform, perform and transform, the Prime Minister highlighted some of the steps that have been taken in the first 3 months since his government's third term began. Now, as per the GDP, India is the 5th largest economy and the fastest growing major economy. Despite challenging global conditions, what makes the Indian economy grow at a healthy pace? How have different sectors been contributing to growth? Also, how is the growth momentum expected to be in the coming quarters after seeing slight moderation in growth in the first quarter of this fiscal? We'll talk about this and much more with Dr. Saurabh Garg, Secretary, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Dr. Garg, it's a delight to have you with us on Sansad TV. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
To begin with, recently the Ministry of Statistics along with the NSO released the GDP estimates for the first quarter of 2024-25. Now, it has been observed that the growth rate has been projected at 6.7%. To begin with, give us and our viewers a sense of what message does it give about the current economic outlook of the country?
Yeah. So the first quarter's growth rate of 6.7% is a very healthy growth rate. And you must compare it with other nations globally. The closest growth rate that comes is that of China at 4.7%. The next is America at 3.1%, and then we have France at 1.1%. Some of the other major economies are all less than 1%, whether it's Canada, whether it's UK and Italy, Germany. So if you look at it on a global level, we are the fastest growing economy. We were the fastest growing economy previously, and the way things are going, we hope to continue to be the faster. What we want to know is whether we'll be able to grow faster, and that's what I think all the programs and initiatives are about.
Certainly, but we'll also talk about the slight moderation that we have seen if we compare it to the same quarter last year. The numbers reflect that in the first quarter of 2024-25, it's 6.7%. In the same quarter last year, the real growth rate was 8.2%. Give us also a sense of some of the factors that could have been behind this slight moderation.
Yeah. So, first of all, I would start with the fact that the growth rate of 6.7% is an extremely healthy growth rate. However, I think some of the factors which led to a slight dip compared to the first quarter of last year, one was the fact that in the month of June, due to the El Nino effect, there was a bad rainfall and there was some impact on the agricultural growth rate compared to that. And also the first quarter was also the time when the general elections were going on. So there's always seen a slight slowdown in activity which happens, and I think that's what has got reflected in the first quarter's growth rate of 6.7%. But if you look at different sectors of the 6.7% there and look at where the growth has done well, and one of them is construction, which has grown at about 10.5%. And construction has always seen to be a bellwether of future growth rates, because it means that a lot of activity is going on, a lot of new construction is going on, and therefore people are building factories, houses, commercial establishments, etc. The second area where growth has been extremely good is the electricity, gas, water supply, utility sector, which again reflects that if this sector is doing well, then production should increase, the kind of new activities there are that should increase. And the third, if you look at, is manufacturing, that has grown at over 7%. So that is also extremely a good sign. So if you look at these three sectors, I'm just looking at it. So there has been a slight downturn in one sector, which is due to natural causes, but the other three areas have been extremely healthy growth.
So in the coming quarters, we will expect some momentum in growth in these sectors as well, which saw some kind of decline.
I won't like to talk about what's going to happen in the future sectors, but all I can say is that the past growth trends seem to reflect a continued healthy growth.
There's always some discussion between the nominal versus the real growth rate. If you could help us and our viewers understand the exact difference between the two, and which one should be the right measure for the growth rate of the country.
So the nominal growth rate is estimated at current prices. So, and current prices means that it incorporates the effects of inflation, and therefore the price rise that happens because of inflation. When we are talking of real growth rates, we are talking with a comparison of a particular base year that we take, and we remove the effect of inflation and the price rise effect. And therefore, the real GDP growth rate really gives a more realistic view of what is happening in the economy, because inflationary impact has been taken away. And therefore, whenever we talk of growth rates, the 6.7% that we are talking about is a real growth rate. And while the nominal growth rate was much higher because of the inflationary impacts. So that's why it's always better to look at real growth rates.
Another thing that I'm curious to know, while I was reading the numbers, while the MoSPI data puts the growth rate at 6.7%, the Reserve Bank of India for the same quarter, the April to June quarter of this fiscal, had projected a growth rate of 7.1%. What is the basis of that difference, even though by a few points, but then we would like to know.
So, we bring out our estimates which are based on sector specific indicators, and we look at a number of data points that are available to us because we have access within the government to what is happening at a number of granular level. A number of agencies make projections with limited information that is available. In fact, there are more than 33 projections made for every quarter. The RBI makes projections, the IMF makes projections, and other international agencies also make projections. But most of these projections are based on limited information that is available, and therefore there's always a variance. In fact, if you look at the 33 projections that were made for the first quarter, and they are made every quarter, it's not just that they were made for the first quarter, it varied from between 6.0 to 8.1%. The median value was similar to us, 6.7%. So therefore, these projections also are a good means of check and balance whether the data that they have limited data, but they make their own assumptions and do it. And therefore, it's always a healthy practice to find out what's happening and what these projectors are doing.
Right. The Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, sir, in addition to the quarterly estimates, also comes out with annual estimates. What are the reasons behind these revisions that are made? What is the basis for these revisions?
So every year when we, apart from the quarterly, we come out with annual estimates, we bring out two advance estimates. The first advance estimate normally is in the first week of January. This time it was on the 5th of January of 24. And that is necessary because on 1st February the budget is presented. So for the budget numbers, an estimate is required that how well has the economy done in that year, and that is the basis for the revenue projections and other projections that are required. And that's how we bring out the first advance estimate, which is based on an 8 or 9 month data that is available. We look at a number of indicators and other data sources, and then we bring out this estimate. A second estimate that we bring out is at the end of February, 28th or 29th February. And that acts as a kind of a year-end estimate for people because they make their plans, etc., for the coming year. It required by the corporates, etc., and that gives a second. And that has around 9 to 10 months of data that we have, and therefore it's slightly a better estimate. And it acts as in case some advance action is required to be taken in the last 1 month or for future if there are some anticipations, investments that are required.
Right.
The first provisional estimate is what we bring out on 31st of May every year, and that really takes into account the whole year's data, and we have much greater information. But at the same time, it's a provisional estimate because a number of the company accounts, they only come out by end of September or sometimes by the end of December depending on the variations. So therefore, they are still provisional, but we have a lot more data from the government, from the public financial management system that we have, and we have data of production, etc. So therefore, that's the provisional estimate. That's the third estimate that comes out every year, and that more or less is near final. I won't say final. We bring out the first revised estimate in February of the next year. That's after about 11 months after the close of the financial year, which ends on for March 31st, that we bring out in February, and a second revised estimate, which is the final estimate. The need for the first revised estimate is that a lot of the corporate data is then available also, and most of the data, in fact 95% of the data is available by then. And the second final estimate, which comes out a year later after that, is more or less just to brush up, and in case there are some minor variations or something like that. But otherwise, the first revised estimate and second revised estimates normally are very little different. So that, yes, you are right. We bring out first 5 estimates or 5 projections and 5 estimates, but they are necessary, and they also show the robustness of the data that we have, the data sources that we have, and the depth of the data that we have.
In fact, that leads me to the next question, which was about the quality and the timeliness of these estimates that the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation is coming up with.
Yeah. So we follow the United Nations System of National Accounts, SNA, and we adhere to those systems very well. Apart from that, there is also the special data dissemination standard of the International Monetary Fund, and these are the 2 international standards. Both of them we follow. The SDDS has 4 dimensions. First is on data coverage and timeliness. So whether it's a comprehensively we are covering all sectors of the data of the economy, and how timely, how frequently, how well we are able to bring out, how fast we are able to bring out the data. And as I mentioned, 2 estimates come out before the end of the year, and the first one comes out within 60 days, which is one of the quickest that we have. Then the second is on access to public. Are we transparent? Do we place it on our website? That's a second criteria. A third is the integrity of the data. What is the robustness of the data? What is the error in the calculation of the data? How robust are the surveys that we do? And then, of course, is the overall quality. So India does extremely well on all the 4 dimensions, and we follow all international standards, and the benchmarks that we use, the systems that we use are among the best globally.
However, sir, there are also lots of discussions around the fact that the GDP base year is quite old. If I could ask you why the ministry hasn't revised this particular area, and are there any plans to revise the base year in future?
So first of all, I would say that we are in the process of revising the base year. We have set up a committee which consists of domain experts from the government, state governments, from academia, researchers, Reserve Bank of India and others, and this committee is looking at this. One of the reasons we couldn't have done it earlier was because of COVID, which came up earlier, and there were also, for example, GST was introduced sometime in 2017-18, which also led to a greater amount of data being available, and which will get incorporated in the next base year revision. So this base year revision is an exercise that we are currently on, and we are working full steam on it, and we are trying to see how fast we can do it, and it will make our systems even more robust. We are looking at what kind of surveys there are to be done, and I think this base year revision will ensure that the credibility of data will only improve as we move ahead.
So since we are moving to a new system, in the revised GDP base, will you be using new or additional source of data, or will you rely on the previous ones with some modifications in the methodology?
In fact, the next phase of base year revision, I would say it's just not a base year revision, it's a comprehensive revision of the way we are going to be calculating GDP. And there are a few reasons for this. One, as I mentioned earlier, that we have GST data now available, which is much more comprehensive, covering all sectors of the economy. So the richness of that data will only ensure that our national accounts become so much more representative and so much more deeper. The second is the digitalization that has happened of the economy over the past 5 to 7 years is leading to a new data sources being available. For example, e-way bills are available now, which were not available, and it's so much easier to incorporate them. And because of the digitalization of that data, the time that will be taken for processing will reduce to that extent, and that will. And the third is the new sets of surveys that we have started. We've done a household consumption expenditure survey, we've done back-to-back too. We started an annual survey of unincorporated sector enterprises. As you know, the informal sector comprises a large number of the enterprises, the industrial or MSMEs, or many of them in the informal sector, they are not registered. So, the fact that we have now a comprehensive survey, annual survey for the unincorporated sector means that we have so much more data available for the informal sector, and which will make it more representative and lend more robustness to our national accounts data.
So, in the national accounts, what are the statistical standards that we are currently using?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, there are two essential standards. One is the United Nations System of National Accounts, which is being used, that is of 2008. And the second is the International Monetary Fund's the dissemination data standards. So, both of them we adhere to. Apart from that, we have a number of other classifications like the National Industrial Classification, National Product Classification. So, we use a host of these systems also to ensure that there is comparability across the years, and there is interoperability in terms of what data that we are using. We are able to see that there is the robustness of that data is strong. So, these are some of the standards, and apart from that, for each sector there are different industrial standards which are there, which are used and which ensure that the data that we collect is robust.
So, in the draft SNA 2025, have there new items that have been added, and if yes, if you could elaborate it for us and our viewers.
So, I think there are 2 or 3 areas where there has been some relook, and that SNA is going to come out in 2025. One is to look at the concept of well-being as a whole, and that means focus on education, on health, and looking at well-being of individuals in general. The second is on sustainability, the concepts of sustainability, concepts of natural resource usage, of environmental accounts. So, that's a second area. And of course, a third is in terms of the impacts of globalization and digitalization. So, how they need to be incorporated to ensure that the accounts reflect the changed circumstances. So, all these will get incorporated in the SNA accounts, System of National Accounts 2025.
Since you spoke about well-being and environment sustainability, so I'll ask you a question about how difficult is it going to be to incorporate measures of well-being and environment sustainability into the national accounts?
Yeah. So, fortunately, you would realize that a lot of our activities that we have been doing in India, and the Honorable Prime Minister has talked about the concept of life, of lifestyle for environment. A number of our other schemes and programs focus on their sustainability. The fact that we are looking at renewable energy sources, 500 gigawatts of renewable energy sources, and a number of every sector that you see, the concept of well-being and sustainability are built into our programs, schemes and initiatives. And therefore, it becomes this will get reflected in the way we collect our data, and what data then comes into the GDP calculations. Even natural resource accounting, that is something which is an extreme part of the way we operate our programs and schemes. So, I think it should be quite easy for us to implement that.
Since you mentioned the collection of data, tell us about the policies of dissemination and communication of GDP to the users.
So, we do it at multiple levels. One is we bring out regular press notes whenever we, for example, when we brought out the quarterly results of the GDP, we put out the press releases which are there on the website of PIB, on our website, translated into different languages. We, through the social media, we bring out infographics which show in simple language the kind of changes that are happening, growth changes that are happening, sectoral changes that are happening, and how does it impact an individual, a citizen of the country. Apart from that, for researchers, we've put out the data in e-Sankhiki, a very user-friendly data portal, which has a host of data visualizations where people can download the data, use it, try and see what kind of graphs, what kind of activities they would like to incorporate it in. And this data is available right from 1950 for the past 70 years. So our transparency standards are among the highest. And as I mentioned in the IMF's SDDS, the data dissemination standard, this is one of the themes of that, one of the dimensions that, and we focus a lot on ensuring that people are fully aware and they have access to this data.
In this age where technology, sir, is evolving very, very fast, how are we using or do we intend to use new and emerging technologies in this process of dissemination and communication of GDP data, making it simpler for the viewer and the user?
Yes. So, as I mentioned, one is of course e-Sankhiki, which is our data portal, which we have revamped it to ensure that it adheres to the latest standards and data visualization is available. And what is also very important is to say that the data sources that we now have comprise the entire digital world. For example, now we have the Ministry of Corporate Affairs has the MCA 21 database, where a large number of companies are active and they put out their annual reports in that. I mentioned about the GST database that is available, which comprises a lot of companies across different sectors.
AI is the buzzword today. How are we using or incorporating the AI tools?
Yes. So, let me just, and also on within the government also now our entire accounts are on the public financial management system. And AI, the data visualization that I mentioned on our portal, uses AI in terms of how to develop data. We are working on a chatbot so that people can ask questions and those questions can be can be answered using AI. And as we move along, for example, one area where we use AI is at a very basic level of data collection. All our data collection is done through tablets, and the software that we have has built-in checks which uses AI to find out if there are any data that has been entered which seems to be extremely out of there could have been mistakes made, and so that's a use of AI. So, AI is something as we move ahead, anything which is digital automatically becomes so much more amenable for using AI.
Absolutely. Is there more that we can do or are in the process of doing towards digitalization of the national accounts?
Yes, I mean, as I mentioned, we have a number of these databases, MCA, we have PFMS, we have the GST database, and we have the e-Sankhiki portal, and a lot of applications, APIs we are using to be able to collect the data and process that data so much faster. So, I think both in processing, in collection and dissemination is something that we are using digital tools extensively.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for explaining to us how these estimates are done and disseminated to the user, and at the same time you are also working on simplifying the data for the common user to understand these numbers, because it's a very, very complicated procedure. It's always a delight to speak to you on Sansad TV. Thank you once again for joining us. And to you viewers, thank you very much for your time as well. Take good care of yourselves. Keep watching Sansad TV.